Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started real soon. If you are not signed in on MeetEcho, please do so, either the full client that you can find linked next to MAPRG in the agenda. Otherwise, there's the QR code at the mic if you want to do it on your mobile phone. You're at the Measurement Analysis for Protocols Research Group meeting. I'm Dave Plonka, one of your co-chairs.
Mia Kulewind. Hello, everybody.
This is the IRTF Note Well Privacy and Code of Conduct. We do things a little bit differently in the IRTF, so it's a little, but the same expectation for courtesy and respect and in the meetings. Our privacy policies links there. If you have any problems having to do with people's behavior or conduct, the Ombuds team is there to help, or come and contact us and we'll tell you how to find them. The IRTF has a slightly different code of conduct that covers, for instance, research topics like ethics and which is different than the code of conduct in the IETF. So that's linked there. The goals of the IRTF, if you're new, are to study perhaps more forward-looking and research topics. That's one of the ways we're different than the engineering task force. We don't conduct research here. We're not a standards development organization, so it's not, some of the strict rules in IETF don't apply here. There's a primer about the IRTF there if you'd like to see that. Specifically, MAPRG is about studying the protocols and the operations of them, measurements related to those, and sometimes we're slightly expansive to future technologies that we see would affect the operation of existing protocols. All these links are here for follow-on stuff like the mailing list and that. You can find them most easily in every IETF agenda next to the MAPRG link, but that's the easiest way. There's some tips. Sign into MeetEcho. So this is how we take attendance, so we get right-sized rooms and stuff. And it's also how you introduce yourself to the queue. If you want to come to the mic, you should have clicked that, and you'll show in the queue in the application. This session is being recorded, of course, and these are things that you agreed to when you joined the IETF meetings. Here's our agenda for today. It's packed. We got 7 contributors coming here, and we've got some front matter to go through. So I'm not going to step through each one. We'll introduce them as we go along, and I'll try to keep you to these timings. So I apologize in advance if we have to cut off the queue or rush you along a little bit to make sure that it's fair to all the presenters. So where we are right now is the IMC just happened last week in my hometown, Madison, Wisconsin. It's the 25th year for IMC. Longtime MAPRG people know we very often borrow things from IMC, either scoop them and show them here first, or we have them afterwards. That's not any different this time. We'll have one talk from IMC. Miria and I are very active in that community, and we've both produced a list of what we suggested reading, or basically highlighted the works there that have to do with IETF topics. I talked with the publication chairs, and I'm waiting to hear from them about when the publications will be available, openly available, but the ones I could find open access, I've linked them here. And first, this is my short list of things, and the ones that are, as a little way to entertain myself, the ones in italics are also the ones that Miria picked. So I'm just gonna, we don't have time to go through these individually, but this is Miria's list. And again, the ones that are in italics are where we thought similarly about really highlight things that are going on in the IETF. There was also a policy-based internet workshop the day before IMC. IMC was quite expansive. It was 4 days this time, the longest it's been. It was 5 days if you include the workshops before. And I've chosen a small set of topics here that, again, that cross over to IETF topics. So check the chair slides if you're interested in those. But that was because it was policy related, it got a little more into the governance aspect. Lastly, in the intro, there's 2 more things happening today in the IAB open meeting. There's an invited talk about IP blocking in the Italian Privacy Shield. So probably of interest to some people here in MAPRG. That's right after this meeting at 11:30. And then late this afternoon will be the second ARMOR meeting of the week. So join for that if you would like. It's going to be in Duluth. And this is like a side meeting, not part of the IETF or IRTF yet. The link there has background on what ARMOR is. So first up, we're going to have Rania Sharma. So I'm going to switch to her slides, and you're welcome to come up, Rania. And
Yeah, and really nice to have you here. Originally, you were presenting online, but you actually came here, so
Yes.
great.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. And my name is Rania. I'm presenting our work, a longitudinal study of the prevalence of Wi-Fi bottlenecks. Okay, there we go. No, that's all good. Perfect. I'm presenting our work, a longitudinal study of the prevalence of Wi-Fi bottlenecks in home access networks. And this was presented at IMC last year in Madrid. So many of our daily activities. Let's see. I don't think the clicker is working.
Oh.
I can also say next slide.
no, Mary asked if she Mary asked if she needed to help me with anything. I said you probably need to push some buttons for me.
No.
There we go. Let's see.
Yes, no.
Perfect. Okay. So many of our daily activities depend on Wi-Fi, from sending texts and emails to checking the weather and browsing the internet. And in the US, 93% of households rely on Wi-Fi, averaging 25 connected devices each, which increases the demand for reliable performance. However, Wi-Fi bottlenecks can severely hinder connectivity, diminishing the effectiveness of even high-speed ISP services. So Wi-Fi bottlenecks occur when the speed of your Wi-Fi connection, i.e. the Wi-Fi speed, is worse than the speed of the access connection, or the access speed. This variability in performance is evident, with some households experiencing significant discrepancies despite similar ISP speeds. And with ongoing investments in internet infrastructure, it's really crucial to also assess and enhance home Wi-Fi equipment to address these bottlenecks. Really, these reasons underscore why it's essential to study Wi-Fi bottlenecks and the motivation driving our work. So as a brief overview, as I'm sure many of you already know, the connection process is that when you connect to the internet, you usually do so through a Wi-Fi router, and your devices connect wirelessly to this router, which is wired to your ISP. So the performance of your Wi-Fi connection can vary independently from the wired connection to the ISP. And this means that even if you have a faster access speed from your ISP, the Wi-Fi speed might still be slower due to various factors. A Wi-Fi bottleneck occurs when your Wi-Fi connection is slower than the speed provided by your ISP. In this case, the overall internet experience can be limited by the Wi-Fi performance, even though the ISP connection is capable of higher speeds. So overall, our research question is, does upgrading your service plan guarantee improved internet performance over Wi-Fi connections? So basically we ask, does having a plan with higher speed tiers result in less Wi-Fi bottlenecks? So for our work, we used the open source Netrix platform to collect measurements. And specifically, we used Measurement Lab's network diagnostic tool, NDT7, to measure the download speeds of both the access link, so the access speed, and the wireless network, which was the Wi-Fi speed. Netrix provides many open source network measurement tests, including a variety of continuous throughput and latency tests. To conduct these measurements, we distributed Raspberry Pis to participants who connected them directly to their home routers or modems. We recruited participants through community organizations and social media, offering them monetary incentives. Participants also completed a survey providing information about their speed tier for our analysis, which we used. We performed access throughput measurements for each household approximately once per hour, and Wi-Fi speed measurements did not follow a fixed schedule due to the fact that the Wi-Fi measurements were taken from a user's browser on a wireless device in their home. Therefore, they depended on the user actively using the device where the browser plugin was installed. Next, to ensure that the measurements compared were taken at around the same time, we resampled the data from each household, and we used a 6-hour time window and aggregated using the median access and Wi-Fi speed within each window. So after running a time series analysis, we decided to use a 6-hour time window because we found that this was the time period in which there was the most samples. So this time window had a broad enough window to contain a large amount of data, yet small enough to intervals to sufficiently splice our data. And overall, our study period was September 18th, 2021 to September 30th, 2023, which was a 24-month span, and we had data from 52 households. So this figure really highlights the prevalence of Wi-Fi bottlenecks across households in our study. And to calculate the prevalence for each household, we compared the household's access throughput to its Wi-Fi speed over time. And we noted the extent to which the Wi-Fi throughput is lower than the access throughput. For example, if a household has 100 measurements of Wi-Fi and access throughputs, and in 20 of these 100 measurements, Wi-Fi throughput is below access speed, then the bottleneck prevalence for this household would be 0.2. We found that 89% of households experienced at least one Wi-Fi bottleneck, indicating that there was at least one measurement collected where Wi-Fi throughput was below the access throughput. Notably, the vast majority of households either experienced no Wi-Fi bottlenecks or a high percentage. So most vantage points do not have a prevalence between 10 and 80%, indicating that in most cases, either Wi-Fi is almost never a bottleneck or it is almost always a bottleneck. And this really highlights a sharp divide in internet quality. And next, I'll show how the factor that differentiates whether a household falls into the category with bottlenecks versus without is based on their speed tier. This figure now shows the prevalence of Wi-Fi bottlenecks across vantage points according to the speed tier of the access network. So each point on each curve represents a vantage point, with the x-axis representing the prevalence of Wi-Fi bottlenecks at the vantage point, and the y-axis represents the cumulative distribution of vantage points. And as expected, vantage points with higher speed tiers see a greater prevalence of Wi-Fi bottlenecks, as I mentioned. So for vantage points with access speeds of tiers of less than 100 megabits per second, the prevalence of Wi-Fi bottlenecks tends to be less, with the median vantage point seeing a prevalence of less than 0.1. On the other hand, for vantage points whose speed tier exceeds 800 megabits per second, the prevalence of Wi-Fi bottlenecks is 1, indicating that all joint measurements in those households do have a Wi-Fi bottleneck. This variation of the prevalence of Wi-Fi bottlenecks also correlates with the measured throughput of the access ISP. The median access ISP throughput among households that experience frequent bottlenecks is 689.64 megabits per second. On the other hand, the median access ISP throughput is only 58.35 for households that rarely experience the bottlenecks. So really, this indicates that Wi-Fi bottlenecks become increasingly prevalent as measured access throughputs increase. Next, to evaluate the magnitude of a Wi-Fi bottleneck, we compare the median Wi-Fi throughput, median access throughput, and the actual throughput of a household, which we define as the minimum of the median Wi-Fi throughput and the median access ISP throughput. The extent of the difference between the actual throughput and the access speed for each tier indicates the magnitude of the Wi-Fi bottlenecks. Households with speed tiers in the 200 to 400 megabits per second range experience a mean actual throughput of 155.99 megabits per second, while the mean access throughput is 265.6. This disparity really shows that while paying for access throughputs between 200 and 400 megabits per second, the median household is typically experiencing actual speeds that are 109.91 megabits per second lower. This gap actually only grows as speed tier grows, as the table indicates, and that the 400 to 800 range had a 240.0 megabits per second gap. And for households in the 800 plus tier, that gap grows to 600.3 megabits per second. Overall, our results really indicate that home wireless networks introduce bottlenecks that often result in households failing to completely utilize the access throughput that they purchased from their ISP. In summary, our main results are that 1, most households either experience no bottleneck or are frequently affected by bottlenecks. 2, that higher speed tiers are directly correlated with increased Wi-Fi bottleneck prevalence. And 3, that median access throughput is correlated with Wi-Fi bottleneck prevalence. All in all, this paper presents a first of its kind study of direct and contemporaneous measurements of access throughput and Wi-Fi throughput in the same home broadband network. It is the first such study in nearly a decade, constituting a reappraisal of Wi-Fi's role as a bottleneck in home broadband networks. And really, through our robust measurement harness, open source tools and data, and ongoing measurements, we track this phenomenon. We hope our work is applied to questions in other domains, including public policy, when considering investments in internet infrastructure. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And we have further details about our work at internetequity.uchicago.edu. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Rania. We've got 3 people in the queue now. And Tan May, if you don't mind coming up so that you're on deck for the next one, that'd be great.
Hey,
Tony.
can you hear me? Thanks for presenting this work. So the bottleneck, so if there were concurrent users on the Wi-Fi, would they achieve maybe more of the,
You get a little bit closer.
more of the utilization? If there were concurrent users, does the bottleneck like apply to all users or each one individually, sort of thing?
Sorry, could you restate your question? I couldn't quite hear you.
So if the users, if there are concurrent users, does the bottleneck apply to all or each one?
I think less than like a user by user basis. We kind of did it like based on the measurements. So I think like that would probably be like an appropriate next step to see how it would work concurrently. But I would assume probably something along those lines that the bottleneck still persists.
Okay, so they wouldn't each get, say, 100 megs of the upstream.
Based by user?
Yeah, like I get 100 and this other person in the household gets 100 and that kind of thing.
We started seeing results similar to that in our study. I think they weren't completely conclusive about like how a household all in all performs with users varying, but close to, yes.
Thanks.
Hi, Greg White from Cable Labs. Thank you for doing the study. This is interesting data, and it'd be interesting for another reason beyond the one you highlighted, and that is for people who are working on identifying where latency occurs in networks, understanding where the bottleneck is important for understanding where to mitigate buffering delays. And so definitely would be interesting if you could also, from your data, get any information about the actual delays that are experienced on the different segments of the network, Wi-Fi versus access network.
Definitely.
Also, I see you've mentioned you're doing ongoing measurements. Be interesting to see how this evolves over time as different generations of Wi-Fi equipment get deployed.
Definitely, for sure. That's a next step that we're working on right now.
Great.
Sorry, Vittorio Bertola. So, well, at the first sight, the study seems to confirm what one would expect, that if the internet access speed is faster than the Wi-Fi, then the Wi-Fi is the bottleneck, and if the access speed is slower, then the access speed is the bottleneck. I was wondering whether there is anything unexpected that you found, so something that would contradict what one would expect, especially maybe in the range where the Wi-Fi speeds and the internet access speeds are more or less the same, and so that might be the more interesting area to understand in the end which of the two is more relevant.
Definitely, for sure. And I think we were more just shocked at the discrepancies between the measurements and the different speed tiers, with just how jarring those gaps were with an already kind of like existing notion of how the bottlenecks exist, just how great they actually are.
Thanks. And I see Arturo is up there. So Arturo, if you could just introduce yourself, we'll close the queue with you.
Yeah, sorry I didn't log in. Arturo Villaston, founder, President, Executive Director, and CTO of the Open Observatory of Network Interference. My question is actually very simple. I was just wondering if you believe that a sample size of 52 is sufficient to come to these conclusions.
Definitely not. Probably, I think we would want to expand this to more participants and also a greater array of vantage points beyond the Chicagoland area. But this was just kind of a more introductory study into studying this phenomenon. And I'd be curious to expand it beyond what we have right now into a greater sample size.
Very nice. We have a measurement platform called uni.org.
Very nice.
It might be helpful.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Awesome.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you so much. Awesome. Thank you.
All right, next up, we have a 10-minute slot for Tan May to present this work here. Go right ahead and be sure you're close enough to the mic. Thanks.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to be presenting on VPNs, how afraid you should be of VPN traffic identification in today's world. So let's begin. So I will give a brief overview of what VPN is. I'm pretty sure everyone knows the basic idea, but it's basically we create a separate encrypted tunnel between your client and a VPN server, which basically browses for your public internet for you, kind of. And in the protocols, what we wanted to focus on this study is the new age protocols, that is the OpenVPN, IPsec, WireGuard, and TLS. And we excluded some older protocols because they are not used in major applications of VPN providers that are provided today. So a brief overview, as I mentioned, your actual packet, which is actually encrypted, and is an outer IP header, which is appended to your packet, which is basically the IP header of the VPN provider that you are using. So there has been previous works that we are to acknowledge that realize like how OpenVPN is actually open to fingerprinting, and there was also recent work where that TLS is how being used in the censorship circumvention area. So we wanted to explore how at this from the protocol level what it basically means and how it is easy to identify such leaks. And why we need to actually look at this. So recent you can say scenarios that governments are moving to actually blocking certain type of websites and monitoring VPNs. And so it basically gives the core question that how VPNs can be reliably blocked using the middle box and the firewalls of the current generation. So these are the three research questions that we make. Firstly, VPNs and DPI middle boxes traffic identification. Second, which protocols are most or least vulnerable and which are easily identifiable, which are hard to detect. And thirdly, what practical evasion strategies are being used today. So we assume the ISP level threat model that where we are basically using middle boxes and they have DPI enabled capabilities, but they cannot pass at arbitrary offset in real time. And we are not considering ML-based large-scale middle boxes in this study for now. So for methodology, we chose one of quite a few popular VPNs as well as some non-popular VPNs, which provide, you can say, censorship circumvention-based protocols, or they claim to be. And we analyzed from like a process perspective as well as from a protocol level. So by process, what we mean is that how the VPN is actually working, what kind of code it is calling, is it open source, is it proprietary, and then we figure out what markers we are looking for, like SNI, packet patterns, protocol signatures, and any other ports or application level thing. And we further actually change the platforms as well, because we wanted to see how different platforms wanted influence the actual VPN fingerprints. So we're going to looking at these two taxonomies. First is open source VPNs, where we consider like the OpenVPN and the WireGuard protocols, and proprietary VPNs like Lightway, NordLynx, and Chameleon, which are proprietary but actually based upon on certain open source modifications. For commercial VPN connections, what we want to clarify is that now there is the two-step authentication. Actually, you don't directly connect to the VPN server. You first connect to an authentication server, which is usually hosted on a major cloud provider and not a leased or VPN server endpoint, where you actually get the major public key data that you need to connect to the actual server. So what we have found that major, in the sense of blocking, major providers can be just blocked by this first authentication step, because their application basically gets rendered non-functional as this authentication step fails, because you don't get the actual server data that you want to connect to. And only some VPN providers has some kind of caching in their application built in, which can basically circumvent this, but it's not reliable and it expires after a certain amount of time. Second, now comes to the OpenVPN part. So as mentioned, OpenVPN is like an standard protocol that was earlier used for VPN fingerprinting, but now what happened is that it has some kind of packet initial packet sessions that are like in plain text, which are easily identifiable, like the p-hard control reset and the client server reset are clear identification that you're being using an OpenVPN packet. So this work already have been identified in a Usenix 2022 study, where people have used that the opcode is clearly visible and can be blocked and has been seen. Secondly, there is an alternative to this, that OpenVPN has appreciate key mode, which basically is actually encrypts the packet at a whole level, but it is not scalable because of the pre-shared key aspects. We do introduce a new modification to OpenVPN, which can basically circumvent this drawback of OpenVPN right now. So for WireGuard, it is also touted as the next generation protocol and a lightweight and UDP based, but there are certain similar drawbacks that it has a pre-shared key sharing. It is very good for small scale deployment, but not good and large enough for large scale deployment. And it also has some clear plain text identifiers and and signatures of like string of zeros, which are easily identifiable by current gen middle boxes. And how are these being used in, you can say, our node links, which is like a modification to WireGuard, is that node basically has a double NATing system at their end where they store this kind of temporary identity to your system, and that's how they are scaling the WireGuard pre-shared key mode. And now some VPN providers are also now moving towards this kind of TLS and SSH-based VPNs. What is TLS-based VPNs is basically they are trying to mimic the browser traffic so that it is very harder to block a normal TLS connection versus, say, a VPN-based TLS connection. And but there are still some potential markers that are available, like SNI and some number of cipher suites that are being used. So some VPN providers are only using non-standard cipher suites and certificates, which are clear identification. Like in Proton VPN, we have seen some non-standard SNIs, which are like gibberish, but this is also not actually really good, but it actually helps to mimic the browser traffic. So it is not easily detectable and has a high collateral damage in our study. So regarding secure shell, so there are, as I mentioned, we looked at some you can say particularly famous VPNs, which in a sense has newer protocols that they claimed, which one of which was SSH. So what they're claiming to be is like they are tunneling your traffic into an SSH tunnel, which is like encapsulated and a high throughput. And but there are some SSH markers, but the same study applies that there would be a lot of collateral damage if you try to block SSH within a enterprise environment. Then, as I mentioned, that this randomized SNI field, no detectable SNI are also clear markers in these kind of protocol TLS-based VPNs, but these do give you a more level of protection than proprietary protocols that have like some identifier information stored at the server's end. So for SSH, I mentioned that the server handshake and high collateral damage if I block. So let's move it. Yeah. So now coming to the evasion strategies. First is like the SNI poisoning, which was already being prevalent, but now it's being less and less used due to the number of checks being produced by the cloud CDN providers. And the new one that I want to mention is the MTU manipulation. Basically, how you can reduce the MTU right now, but it would have a performance impact on multimedia-based consumption, and not much on the text-based or general consumption. So we did actually analyze like how would this perform, and we didn't see a huge decrease for majorly text-based data. But in multimedia-based scenarios, there might be some cases that we need to do study. And for firewalls, we wanted to mention that we actually tested these protocols with our most recent firewall from Fortinet, and how these XOR patches and other kind of modifications to these protocols sum up, and how easily are they detectable by these. And we found that these firewalls currently depend on a static signature level protocols, which gets updated over time. But it's still like a cat and mouse game. It's not robust enough that you can rely that the VPNs would be blocked all the time. And as I mentioned, the TLS case, TLS is still a relevant VPN that you can use, which is like which will help you basically mimic your traffic as from browser. And configurability, the major problem with this was like you cannot dynamically currently analyze packets and at line rate. So custom rules are there, but there's some fixed and specific patterns that you can control. For some of the proprietary protocols, we found that you cannot basically detect them just because that how they change the offset of the packet. And we have in a paper we like to study the number of protocols and how they basically think and what are the kind of identifier patterns and how we can improve them. And we like to acknowledge some of the limitations currently that we are working on for in our future study, that we wanted to even expand from a different vantage points and more VPN providers, and finding how application updates changes this current scenario. And we do propose a new protocol for OpenVPN for scaling disappreciate key mode, and how you can basically have the advantages of a fully encrypted packet inside, but it is still in a work in progress, and we are working in a future experiment for this. And these are the conclusion. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, we've got some minutes for some questions. So Arturo, you're up in the queue. And Johannes, for your talk coming up next, by the end of the queue, could you be up here and ready? Thanks.
Put the question. So I was just wondering, there's a working group here called MASC, Multiplexed Application Substrate over QUIC. And I was wondering if, as part of the future work, it could be considered to also look into the blocking resistance, as well as other metrics related to the use of QUIC.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we are actually looking into that, but that's a great suggestion. I would happy to talk to you about more about that.
I didn't understand what you said. I missed a word.
Yeah, so actually we are looking into like some providers that are trying to move over to the QUIC protocols, but no major providers has any QUIC based protocol as of right now when we did search analysis.
As far as I know, Cloudflare is using it for their Warp VPN. I believe also Apple is using it for private relay. And I think Microsoft is working on something. And there's also, as far as I know, Chrome is planning to ship it as part of their browser, which I believe is the only C++. No, I'm mistaken. I saw some open source code in the Chrome code base that implemented a subset of MASC. I might be mistaken.
Yeah, so that is still all in like currently in development. For Cloudflare Warp, it is majorly based on WireGuard.
No, it made a switch. There's a
okay.
I don't know. Anyways, it might be something for future work.
Yeah. So thank you.
All right, Lorenzo.
Yeah, I was sort of going to ask you, you sounds like you only looked at TLS over TCP. It sounds like you didn't look at TLS over QUIC. Obviously, TLS over TCP is going to have bad congestion control properties, where if you send UDP over it, it's just not going to perform very well. One question I have is, one obvious attack that you can mount on this is you can basically, if you have a wiretap close to the data center, you can basically correlate packets in, packets out. It apparently is like actually not that hard. And so you look at packet size and you can figure out who's sending the traffic, which is all you care about anyway. So I'm wondering if you've seen any implementations that use more than one server. Sounds like here's like very like straightforward VPN. One endpoint, one tunnel, one VPN server. And it's kind of trivial to look at the traffic in and out of that.
Yeah.
Have you seen anything that uses more than one server?
Yes. So recently Proton VPN and NordVPN have come up with this 2-hop architecture, where basically your traffic basically gets routed to 2 of their internal server, and they call it the secure, even more secure cell or some brand name. But it's essentially 2-hop servers. And in that, we are actually analyzing that how this architecture behaves, and there are some vulnerabilities in we have figured out as well, as we're working on it.
Okay. Because one other approach is that something that we're looking at is to have the app contract its own kind of server and use a connection to that server with whatever SNI or ECH, but on a per app basis. And so every app would go to its own server. And I think that would sort of significantly raise the bar here for someone who is trying to correlate. But I guess no one's doing that yet, I suppose.
Yeah, so that was one of our also initial analysis, that this authentication server is the key fingerprintable, you can say, step in this, because everything can be just blocked at this level rather than you trying to figure out more sophisticated filtering for at the firewall level.
All right, thanks, Lorenzo. Thanks to me. So I was mistaken. We have Wei Tong up next. We're going to switch to his slides. And okay, they're up, and you got 10 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you for introduction. And I'm Wei Tong from Virginia, and today I'm presenting our work, The Threat Landscape of IP Leasing in the RPK Area, a collaboration with Yunze and TJ. This paper has been accepted to our client last year. Let's start with some background. IPv4 space has been nearly exhausted for years. To keep servers running, many organizations turn to IP leasing, rent IP blocks from other holders instead of buying them. The leases are usually arranged through brokers or sometimes made directly between leaser and leasee. They're quick, flexible, and cheap, but there's a catch. Ownership doesn't change. In our record, the leaser remains official owner. By checking the WHOIS IR cross-check with the BGP, we see there are around 45,000 perfect under lease today, increased from 35,000 in past 4 years. On the other side, the RPKI secure BGP to verifying whether a root announcing its origin AS is authorized. The address holder creates root origin authorizations or rules saying which AS numbers may announce they are perfect. Routers perform root origin validation or weak and drop announcement that doesn't match with the rule. So today, over half of the IPv4 table has rules, and interestingly, least perfect are more likely to have them because many ISPs and cloud providers require valid rules for bringing your own IP services. So RPKI and leasing are increasingly intertwined. To create and manage rules, the resource owner registered in RIRs and the rule certificate are usually hosted in RIRs repo, but someone can decide to run their own CA and publication point server on the RIRs. This ownership model become a problem once leasing enters the picture. So here's an example. The leaser owns a stack 20 and leases out the subnet stack 24 to another AS. Only leaser can create rules. The lease is announced stack 24, where the leaser can still announce the less specific stack 20. Ideally, the leaser can create a rule authorizing the lease's AS number, making both perfect RPKI valid. However, a malicious leaser can simply remove the lease's rule, so lease's announcement will go RPKI invalid and being filtered. Then traffic ultimately fall back to the leaser's less specific valid perfect. That means they can hijack traffic without sending any invalid BGP update. So due to that very clear threat, the brokers and the leases need to keep monitoring rules, whether deploying validation servers themselves or checking public servers regularly. But we found RPKI does not guarantee global consistency because it's basically an NGX server. So what a leaser can do is running their own publication servers and showing different rule files to different validators. For example, the leaser can first send the lease compliance rule to the brokers and validators, making the lease's BGP announcement RPKI valid to these validators, so everything looks fine, and the brokers will think the leaser is doing a good job. However, the leaser can present a different rule to other validators on the internet, making lease's announcement RPKI invalid and being dropped in these networks. Thus, the traffic toward the lease stack 24 space will be forwarded to the leaser. So this creates a completely covered hijack without conflict BGP and cannot be detected by brokers and leases. To pull this off, the attacker need to know which validators the broker or leasee use. In most of cases, the network operators host their validators inside a network. So it's very easy to find out by checking the incoming IP address in our publication point. Even the validators are hosted outside, like in like a cloud platform, we can still easily fingerprint each validator to its users. To do that, we can announce one perfect and deliver different rules to the internet, one to make our perfect valid and one to make it invalid. We then scan the internet with perfect to see which networks dropping the ping, and which means that networks using validators that received a different rule. So we actually tested in practice using AWS, Volta, and the Premium Testbed. We successfully fingerprint the validator used by this platform and all 4 famous public validators. And the average hijack success rate for code hijacks is over 80%. We even obtain a less encrypted TLS certificate without hijacking any other networks by feeding unique rules only to upstream hosting less encrypted vantage point. Next, we measure how many least perfect are actually at risk. So out of 44,000 least perfect, about 76% still have rules controlled by leasers, and more than 1,000 of them are already RPKI invalid today. And what's even worse is that 27% of these cases, traffic already flows through the leasers' ESs because always deploying a lot of ISPs. But we don't know if that's all because of misconfiguration or someone already hijacked this lease space. So for mitigations, we propose this 3 approach. Firstly, for short-term mitigations, brokers and leases need to check rule consistency from multiple vantage points using tools like RTI monitoring. Secondly, the current RDP protocol design allows the inconsistency between the rules each publication point feed, and it's also allowed the publication point to fingerprint each validators. So there's some effort on the working group to make the RDP make sure the consistency and against the fingerprint. For the long-term mitigation, the leaser hijack can happen only because the raw access is still remaining in the leaser's account. There's way to delegate access to rules. However, in current settings in many RIRs, that delegation is all or nothing. So one account can delegate the access for all the perfect, but not just for least perfect. So there might be a improvement on policy for the RIRs to allow the partial delegation on the raw access. Thanks a lot for listening, and I'm willing to take any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Wei Tong. We've got a couple minutes for the queue, so get up there if you want to. Thanks for the compromise about getting into the 10-minute slot. Okay, if there's nothing, thanks again. And we'll move on. Okay, we've got Johannes up next with work from IMC last week, but a different one of the authors presenting. Go ahead, you got 10 minutes.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Johannes, this was joint work with TUM. I'm at MPI at the moment. We looked into happy eyeballs and how the current state there is to also help with the standardization of happy eyeballs version 3. Yeah. So I guess most of you know this. There is an increasing number of protocols. Not all of them can work perfectly together. So we have IPv4 versus IPv6. We need to decide whether we want to use QUIC or TLS over TCP. Now we have this whole ECH thing in TLS or just plain TLS, H3, H2, H1. At the end of the day, the client somehow needs to decide. And the best case is, well, the user uses the best possible stack regarding to speed or privacy or whatever there is. But at the end of the day, users just want to use the service. So there needs to be some sort of a fallback. And one solution there is to some degree happy eyeballs. Now, what does that mean? What does the standard say? Just a refresher. There is version 1. It says there is a local preference. We all know that has to be IPv6. So you start with IPv6. If IPv6 doesn't work after a certain connection attempt delay, you fall back to IPv4 and take whatever works. This was already standardized in 2012 and then updated in 2017, where DNS and some more details about the address selection were added. So the idea is at the end, you send a quad A and A query at the beginning. If you get the quad A record back, you're happy. If you get the A record back first, you still wait a small resolution attempt or resolution delay. If quad A comes back, you're happy again. If A comes back, you just go with it to be faster. So those are the 2 points, and we wanted to look at them. Also, there is a whole lot of estimated or measured numbers in the RFCs that say you can wait like this, or you wait this. You can have a dynamic connection attempt delay or a static one. So there is a whole lot of options what to do. And at the end of the day, the question is, how do web clients actually implement Happy Eyeballs? How is it used? On one side, one could just come here and talk to the implementers or look at the source code if it's open source, but I'm paid for research, so we looked into this from a research perspective and try to evaluate what is the current state of Happy Eyeballs, how can we measure it, and then at the end, how can we use this to support the standardization of version 3. So what does this mean for us? We built a local test environment, but also a web testing tool that all of you can use. IPv6 is available here, so you can actually test it. It is just a simple web page. You have to activate JavaScript if you block that. Don't block it for this test. And it runs some measurements on the client side and interprets them there. You can share the data with us if you want to. You don't have to. At the end, you see what is done in different scenarios. It's also open source and under active development. We are open to any ideas how to improve it. So some more details. What does it do? There is one test for the connection attempt delay where we add artificial delay on our side, on the server side, using TCNetM. And then we have different IP addresses with those specific delays. Looking at some results, here we have the results for Google Chrome or Chromium-based ones. Each column is a specific delay from 0 to milliseconds to 5 seconds. Each row is the same test again. Green is good, that is IPv6 is actually used. Yellow is it falls back to IPv4. What we see is Google Chrome or Chromium uses a static delay of 300 milliseconds. So it tests IPv6. After 300 milliseconds, if it's not successful, it falls back. If you do this now, you might see different results because there is some additional latency from here to Munich where the server is run, but still you get the gist of it. Firefox at the end uses a static delay of 250 milliseconds. It's also in their code and in there. However, when we look at Safari, we see a different picture. It is way more random. What they do is they actually follow more suggestions from the Happy Eyeballs version 2 standard that says you can do a dynamic delay based on previous results. So if v6 is always bad for a domain, for a address or prefix, you can remember that and don't try it or try it rarely. So it's not always that clear, but you still see that it tries v6 at the beginning and only falls back afterwards. Now, how do we do the resolution delay? What we have is a authoritative name server, a custom built one on our side that just delays the responses based on some encoding in the domain. So, for example, there is something like delay quad A by 50 milliseconds in the domain that the browser tries to access. We delay it and see the results. So if this is used, we should see something. This time we start with Safari because it's the better results here to show. In this case, 2 rows are one experiment together. The first row is where we delay the A record. The second row is where we delay the quad A record. And then once again, each column is a different delay. Green is once again v6 is used. If we delay the A record, always IPv6 is used. The quad A record basically comes instantly, so it can use it and try the connection attempt with that. If we delay the quad A record, for Safari at least, after 50 milliseconds, it gives up on it, falls back to the A record that is already there, and directly connects to our server via IPv4. And this is the recommendation of Happy Eyeballs version 2. Now, we thought It's out there since 2017. Everybody might implement it. What we found is that is not the case. We also talked to Chrome and Firefox about that. They don't use this mechanism. What we see is that, for example, for Firefox here, it always waits at the end. The tests take way longer. It uses get address info in most cases, which blocks anyway, so they can't use this functionality at the moment. And in some cases, and this highly depends on the resolver that is at the end used and how this answers, if the A record is delayed too long and there is a weird timeout, then the browser might decide it has no address, even a quad A record should be available somewhere, and it fails completely. I mean, the higher delays are highly unlikely on the internet, but still there is some randomness in that. Some additional points, or in general, what we've seen is that this DNS resolution part is harder to do. The APIs of the system don't allow this necessarily. Depending on what version 3 now does, this might be added or not, only to some degree or not, and it might even fail at the end. How the resolver behaves impacts all of this, so it's not only how the browser implements it, but the whole network and the resolver together will implement this. Something people might hate me for. We could also think about happy eyeballs for other clients, so resolvers could do this as well, or at least they have to decide which protocol to use at some point in the future. What we've also seen is if you use those cool mask tunnels or proxies, if they have to establish a connection as well, they can do this. For iCloud Private Relay, in some scenarios, we saw that the different egress proxies showed different behavior, whether they use v6 or v4, given different delays. So at the end, currently only Safari implements version 2 as it is standardized. The others still use version 1, but all of them plan to implement version 3. It can highly impact the client behavior or experience as well. We are expanding our tool. We are adding the new records that are required for this. We currently added a test that allows you to see whether your browser even uses HTTP3 and in which scenario. So given an HTTPS resource record or an alternative service header, you might need to activate DOH. You might need to, or we saw at least that in some of our cases, HTTP coalescing was a problem that should now be fixed. So you can see whether that works. And we want to add the new functionality for version 3 in the future. Yeah, with that, I'm at the end. I'm open for questions and feedback.
Yeah, thanks a lot for bringing this, given this is really input to an existing working group. And we're really good on time, so we have time for some questions.
If we have time, I will ask two. So first question, and the prefix is, I don't know so much about IPv6, so maybe it's a dumb question. So excuse my ignorance. What is the need for more addresses in light of carrier grade NAT? Second question, what is the hurry? Like why, you know, I grew up in the internet days when you would connect with a, 56K, it made all the sounds, and you would set to download the file, you would set it at night, and you would wake up in the morning and you had a file. So I don't know. These are my two questions.
I mean, you can definitely reply, but I think these are two things to discuss offline mostly. I think there are a lot of people in the room. I'm happy to talk to you.
Oh, okay. Sorry, beginner.
Should I note that as take it offline or take it outside?
Whoa. I got protection. Look, I got this pen, you see? Pencil. It's sharp. So, like this goes on the neck.
We're good on time, but not that good that we have.
So you better not.
All right,
you know what I mean?
We'll talk to the Ombuds team. Toro, sit down.
Say that again. Say that again. Can you put this on record? What did you say?
I said the thread of the pen is that we're going to talk to the Ombuds team.
No, anyway. I didn't. Ombuz?
It's a decorum.
Joke. Okay.
Decorum. Anyway, so not in a chair role, but the comment that I wanted to make, just at the risk of stating the obvious, we talked about this in the Happy Working Group. This tool did not exist in 2017 when HEV2 was around, so no developer had the ability to test on demand their implementation against this thing. So the opportunity is now that the tool's there and this team is willing to implement what gets written into HEV3, if you want to implement HE in your browser or another application, you will be able to test it using their facility. They've even put a portion in where you can customize the delay. So I'm optimistic to see that it might be easier to implement the much more difficult HEV3, but time will tell. Go ahead, Tommy.
All right, Tommy Polly, Apple. Thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciate all the measurement and the tools as someone working on the Happy Eyeballs documents and implementations. Because, you know, briefly to the other question around IPv6 stuff, I think the main point is like, this is, while there are many reasons why IPv6 is used, etc., the point here is less about, we like IPv6 and more, it's that the reality of the networks is that there are different things that are available to connect to. And like you had early on in your slides, when you have v6 and v4 and QUIC and TLS and TCP, they may not all work in all scenarios, and you want to find the thing that works. So it's less about why are you doing this and more that you do have to navigate this as a client. So the 2 points or questions I wanted to make to you. One, for the tool, as you were measuring, you saw like the example that was more random in Safari. I'm guessing that is because of the thing it does, which is mentioned in V2 around the historical data, that it has learned kind of, oh, this is how long it's taken me to connect to these things. So I'd be curious to see if there are ways in how the tests are run or the order in which the tests are run that are influencing historical caching that would help implementations validate their caching logic and essentially say, okay, if you do this enough times, are you able to predict correctly? But when you're changing the value a lot, it will make it a bit more random because you are skewing the historical data intentionally.
Yeah, so comment on that. One thing is we now have the ability to give you the domains we use for the test. So you could create a sequence yourself to do this and get to those scenarios. And we will expand on this. And if time permits, I also planned a debugging session with Eric to see what happens in Safari actually. Because with even more delays, it looked kind of weird and it was very sticky to V4 at some point.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, it's not random, I guess. So there is some caching behavior behind it, but finding this out here. Also probably adding a scenario where V4 is definitely worse because currently we always delay V6. I mean, we can delay V4 as well, not that detailed, less addresses, but this is planned, yeah.
Right. And when you have different domains, do those always map to different v6 addresses, or are they mapping to the same addresses sometimes?
Currently, they map to different addresses per delay. So one address per delay, not completely randomized, and all the same prefix. So if you don't cache on address granularity, but prefix granularity or whatever, yeah.
And then just one other thing, this is a bit more of a plug for when the Happy session later. While this tool is so great for looking at, how do things behave, I think one of the other questions we want to have that relate to measurement are around how do we potentially update the recommended tunings in the documents to reflect reality, because this is showing you here synthetically all the different possibilities. How do we then, as a measurement community, collect which ones of those are seen in the wild and which ones are most impactful for users?
I mean, I guess that is mostly your job. Having
it is the community's job.
No, but having access to the browser data on a larger scale. I mean, for me, it's hard to do those measurements.
Of course. But I mean, that's something that, hopefully many different clients can all gather data on. But I think it's also useful for the people looking at the research and measurement here to maybe help recommend what are the right things to measure and gather from that large data set.
Yeah, definitely. So We also like the data to it.
Thanks, Tommy. Let's go. Jeff, are you going to go? You're in the queue after. All right, thanks.
Hi, Johannes. Excellent talk as always. Vab Vajpayee, Hasselblad Institute. The web interface is excellent. I have used it from multiple vantage points, so we have actually received data from my side as well. I don't know how far are you in the implementation of HV3, because we have an implementation of the current state of the draft. And so if you want to plug this in, we would be happy to contribute this code base. Robert, who is my PhD student, this is actually on site, in the chat. So maybe you want to interact with him, and then maybe we can collect large scale measurements.
Okay, cool.
HVP3.
That's
Sounds
amazing.
perfect.
That's why we're here.
Yeah.
And there's more comments in the chat, so have a look at that.
I will
Thank you
read them.
very much.
Thanks.
Thanks, Johannes. Okay, next we have Tom Vaughn, that I'm going to thank in advance for helping us get back on time. He says he needs about 6 minutes in the 10-minute slot, so we'll have time for questions.
Cool.
This is, which one is this? This is
Okay. Hello. Thank you for having me, everyone. My name's Tom Vaughan. I'm principal engineer at the Common Crawl Foundation. I'm going to talk about some. Yeah.
Yeah, you can hold it if you like.
Wow. 222. Okay, these are some observations we've made while switching on HTTP2 support with our web crawler. So some background information on Common Crawl is that Common Crawl is a non-profit organization. We do a very large crawl of the web. It's monthly is something like 3 to 5 billion pages. We make the data accessible to everyone for free on Amazon S3. And this is generally people who are interested in running analysis on language and web security and things of that nature. We have over 10 petabytes of data archived since 2007. We're cited in over 10,000 research papers. And at present, yeah, we do between 2 and 4 billion. Well, last month was like 3 billion web pages. Data is hosted in Amazon S3. It's made possible by the AWS Open Data Sponsorship Program. We had about an exabyte of egress in 2024, just to give you some idea of how much data is taken from S3 to run various analyses. So more about Common Crawl is that our crawler is a fork of Apache Nutch, which does not speak HTTP3 yet. There isn't a concrete plan in place to add that at the moment, but we're open to the idea. Our crawl is steered by domain-based harmonic centrality rankings, which is similar to PageRank. It's constructed by aggregating the host level data at the pay level domain level using the PSL. We publish WARC files, WAT files, and WET files. That's Web Archive timestamp and WARC encapsulated text files, along with web graphs in BV graph format on a monthly basis. We have 2 indices, one traditional CDX index for Wayback and one Apache Parquet columnar format, which you can query using Amazon Athena and things like that. And we preserve the robots.txt files that we fetch also. We pride ourselves on being a very polite crawler. We respect robots exclusion protocol and crawl delay, and we don't spoof our user agent. We don't go behind any kind of residential proxies or anything like that. We try to be as polite as we possibly can. This is harmonic centrality in a very simplified form. Basically, it's about how well connected or how central a host is within the web, rather than PageRank, which is more about how popular something is. There's a very good talk by Paolo Boldi from the University of Milano on what this means and the zoo of centrality measures, because there's a lot of them. HTTP2, as you've all probably, you probably all know this, HTTP2 was introduced in 2015 to improve performance and efficiency over HTTP 1.1. It's defined in 9113, RFC 9113. HTTP2 keeps the core semantics like methods, status codes, URIs. but modernizes transport with multiplexing, header compression, and stream prioritization. Adoption has grown quite steadily across browsers and servers, but measurement at this point has been quite limited until fairly recently. This is an example of an HTTP2 WARC capture. So we see in this example, we captured a Wikipedia page fetched over HTTP2 and TLS 1.3. Common Crawl's WARC files now record protocol level details for each fetch. WARC protocol field was it was reused to encode both HTTP and TLS versions to avoid breaking the existing tools downstream. Downstream WARC readers must handle repeated headers correctly, otherwise they're not going to have a good time. So HTTP2 lacks a reason phrase, for example, OK for 200 in HTTP 1.1. We decided to not put an artificial phrase in, but we added a space after the status code, just so that parsers were able to handle this. When HTTP2 was first accidentally enabled in 2020, many WARC readers failed due to unfamiliar status lines, e.g. HTTP2. This prompted the current design choices to maintain backward compatibility while preserving new protocol data. In July of 2024, we deliberately activated HTTP2 during the CC main 2024-30 crawl, and subsequent analysis of January 2025 crawl. We see the dataset, by the way, includes about 3 billion pages from 49 million hosts and 39 million registered domains. 61% of all fetches in January 2025 used HTTP2, including failed attempts. This provides a large-scale empirical view of protocol adoption in the wild. More specifically, we have some numbers here. Yeah. Behold. Feast your eye on that. We also have some pretty depressing numbers on IPv6 adoption as well, by the way, but that's probably for a different presentation. We'll see that HTTP2 is adopted. This is split by TLD. We'll see that Australia is quite good, has a lot more HTTP2 than HTTP 1.1. And this is HTTP2 plus, by the way, so HTTP3 is often going to be falling back to HTTP2. .cn for China is still stuck on HTTP 1.1, majority of it. And yes, all of these numbers are in the data in the slides. So the top 30 top-level domains that we crawled for this crawl are here. So it doesn't give you much of an idea of where stuff comes from, because com obviously is used by lots of different countries. Is not a reliable way to say that that's English or whatever. So we saw a reduction of time spent fetching for HTTP2 when we enabled it, for the most common combination of HTTP2 and TLS 1.3 in comparison to HTTP 1.1 and TLS 1.3. So we see about a 2.5% reduction in CPU time spent for the entire fetcher job. So a very small reduction in time, but 3 billion pages, it's not insignificant. The Web Almanac has some nice things to say about this. And yeah, I'm sure you all know what a CDN is, but they include that definition for anyone who doesn't. And yes, we'll see about 85% of the requests in 2024 were over HTTP2 plus. So in summary, HTTP2 now dominates the large-scale web traffic. 61% of the fetches seen in that crawl we looked at. It improves fetch times, reduces CPU load a little bit. Implementation required careful handling of WARC compatibility to not mess things up for people downstream. Common Crawl data basically enables reproducible, open research on real-world web technology adoption. We welcome collaboration, and I welcome any questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom. So let's get one question or comment in, and then I'm going to close it because we got to give the last two people their 10 minutes. So questions, comments?
I'm just wondering, because I studied mathematics at Università Roma Uno, and they didn't teach us this harmonic centrality. And I was wondering if you could give me a reference, just so I can look it up at home.
Yeah, if you look at the University of Milan, there's Stefano.
Wait. Too fast.
Offline, you have to take it off.
Okay,
But
sorry.
I want to ask a quick question. So everybody can do the analysis you did themselves because
Yes.
the data is there. But do you also provide this analysis somewhere?
Yeah, there's in one of the slides there is a link to the S3 bucket where this stuff is somewhere.
Okay, yeah, I
But
can find
yeah,
it.
there it is.
Yeah, okay,
on
nice. Okay, thank you very much.
slide
Very
8.
useful data.
Thanks very much.
All right, Suleiman is with us remotely. I'm going to put up your slides and we'll pass control to you. That's not this one. Okay. You should have slide control momentarily, Suleiman. So you got 10 minutes. Thanks for joining us.
All right, thank you. Hi everyone, it's great to be here. I'm Suleiman from Cloudflare, where I work on the research team. And today I'll present a few connection level characteristics we observe for TCP connections arriving on our CDN servers. For instance, connection durations, packet counts, and so on. So let's get started. So as you all know, like connection level telemetry can be very useful. It can help us understand how the internet is being used and also help guide improvements to network protocols. But collecting measurements at internet scale can be difficult. And on top of that, many network operators often find it challenging to share such observations given the significant time and effort required to gather and present such data at scale. So we wanted to help move the needle here, as you know, like Cloudflare acts as a reverse proxy for websites by offering CDN services. Therefore, our servers receive connections from a diverse set of clients, including browsers, APIs, other services, all trying to access the internet. So to study these connections, we made use of our generic logging pipeline to passively collect a uniform 1% sample of all TCP connections at each of our client-facing server of our global CDN. And so the data consists of TCP connections serving requests over HTTP 1 and 2, which make up roughly 70% of the 84 million HTTP requests per second that servers handle on average. Each entry in the data consists of socket level metadata captured through the Linux kernel TCP infrastructure. For those unfamiliar, this TCP infrastructure data structure in the kernel collects a variety of metrics related to a TCP connection, such as packet counts, congestion window sizes, and so on. And then it exposes them to the user space programs. In addition to that, our logs also capture application layer metadata, such as number of requests sent on a connection, the connection duration times. The point being that we focus strictly on connection level metadata for this analysis that I'll be presenting. Right. We also further elected to focus only on useful connections, and by useful I mean we focus on connections that gracefully close with a fin packet. So we ensure avoiding half open or drop connections. We also filter out idle connections and those that do not carry any HTTP traffic. Therefore, each connection considered in an analysis carries at least one successful HTTP request. And interestingly, these filters make up 11% of all the TCP connections that we observe. So for this analysis, we focus on the remaining 89%. All right, now jump into the first distribution. So here we have the distribution of number of response packets that Cloudflare servers send back to clients presented as a CDF. The x-axis shows the number of packets on a log-based 10 scale, and the y-axis represents the cumulative fraction of total connections. A quick note, I'll continue use of log scales throughout the talk, so just keep that in mind. The CDF allows us to capture both common and extreme cases in a single view, so we can clearly see the long, heavy tail nature of internet traffic. But looking closer at the distribution, the median is just 12 packets, which means half of all internet connections are very, very small. Even at the 90th percentile, which means 90% of connections carry only about 107 packets. For reference, the average of distribution came out to be 240 packets, which means the extreme skewness of the data originates from a few connections, like video streams or large file transfers that carry massive amount of data. And we also refer to such flows as the elephant flows. And on the other hand, however, most connections are tiny, small, like small web objects, microservices, or API responses. And this is also, these connections are also known as mice flows. So using the same graph, let's now look into how response packet counts vary by HTTP protocol version. For HTTP1 connections labeled as HTTP1X on the figure shown in blue, it includes both HTTP 1.0 and 1.1. The median response was just 10 packets, and 90% of connections carry fewer than 63 packets. In contrast, HTTP2 connections in orange tend to be larger, with a median of 16 packets and a 90th percentile of 170 packets. So these relatively higher packet counts for HTTP2 likely results from its additional flow control messages and the ability to multiplex multiple streams over a single connection. Right. Now I'll move on to the next one. So, another dimension to look at the data is using bytes sent and received by our servers, which captures the actual volume of data delivered over each connection. Here we plot the ratio of bytes sent to bytes received as a CDF, providing insights into how asymmetric internet connections are, and essentially how much it essentially means like how much data our servers send compared to what they receive back from clients. So across all connections, the median ratio was around 3.8, meaning that in half of the cases, servers send nearly 4 times more data than they receive. The average ratio was just much higher, like 81, reflecting the long heavy tail in the CDF caused by download heavy flows. Right. Now, let's look into connection durations that provide insights into how the data exchange unfolds over time. The x-axis of the CDF is in seconds and log scale again, which captures connection durations. We see that half of all connections complete under 5 seconds, as determined by the median of distribution. And while most of the connections complete between 0.1 and 300 seconds, the spread in the distribution highlights that some connections can be extremely long-lived, lasting even multiple days. These are likely persistent sessions or multimedia traffic maintained through keep alive, probably, or connection use. But still, the point is, majority of the web traffic remains short, bursty, and transient. So a single connection can also carry multiple HTTP requests, and which reveal patterns of connection multiplexing. And in this plot, we show that the number of requests per connection broken down by the HTTP protocol version. The key takeaway is that for both HTTP 1 and 2, the median number of requests was just 1, showing that most connections carry very few packets. But because HTTP 2 supports multiplexing or multiple streams, the 90th percentile for it rises to around 10 requests, with occasional extreme cases carrying even thousands, which is often amplified by connection coalescing support. In contrast, HTTP 1 connections rarely exceed 2 requests, even at the 90th percentile, which is also consistent with this design of 1 request per connection, especially true for HTTP 1.0. All right, so these connection level characteristics can also help us provide further insights into the network path characteristics. And to see how, let's take congestion window sizes, which is also abbreviated as CWIN on the slide, which is the number of packets that can be transmitted without waiting for acknowledgement from the receiver. We call these packets are bytes in flight in a connection. And in this case, the sender is our server and the receiver is the client or the user. The figure illustrates the congestion window sizes of connections that remain active long enough to enter TCP steady state phase. It was interesting to see the median to be roughly 464 kilobytes, which corresponds to 310 packets if we consider the 1500 byte MTU as a standard. We also saw there's also some extreme flows carry tens of megabytes in flight as well. And it's important to note that these values reflect a mix of network paths from Cloudflare to both end users and other neighboring data centers from other operators, which are also typically well provisioned and offer higher bandwidth. So we initially thought that these values were generally high. But we later realized that in BBR, which is the congestion control algorithm used in the Nilix kernel, this was somewhat intentional, as BBR sets the window size above the estimated path capacity or the bandwidth delay product of the path by design, so that it can handle network variability and sustain performance. Therefore, to illustrate this, we replot the previous congestion window distribution alongside BBR's estimate of the bandwidth delay product for the same network path observed in our connections. Well, the difference was clear. The median C-win was roughly 464 kilobytes, but the median estimated BDP was roughly 77 kilobytes, or roughly 50 packets. Right, so what's the takeaway? The takeaway here is that such insights can help us guide towards optimizing even for congestion window sizes. And in fact, in some of our own experiments, it shows that the initial congestion window can impact the performance of a connection by 30 to 40%, especially for smaller connections that dominate the internet, as we just saw. So this analysis also motivated the question whether we should revisit the default initial congestion window size of 10 packets specified in RFC 6928, which has remained unchanged for over a decade. All right, so I'm short on time, so I'll just sum it up right now. We saw like the elephants and mice phenomena describes how most flows are small and few are very large. And in our analysis, we aim to define where the boundary exists between them. So we consistently observe the pattern of how internet connections are highly heterogeneous, are asymmetric, where most are short and transient in nature. And finally, before I wrap up, if you're interested in a more deeper dive into this analysis, I highly encourage you to check out our recently published blog post. It's a link on the slide. I'm also very curious to hear from the community. Access to such connection level characteristics would be useful to you. So if you have any ideas, feedback, or questions, feel free to reach out to us directly or in the posted email. So with that, thank you so much, and I'm open to any questions.
All right, we're gonna fit in one question or comment if you want to do it, and then Tommy, if you could get ready to take us to the end of the meeting, that'd be great.
Yeah, I don't think we have a question, but really thank you for bringing the data. It's really useful for us.
All right, thank you.
All right, well, thanks so much for joining us.
All right, Tommy Pauly from Apple, and we'll also be looking at per connection metrics here. Yep, okay, good, great. The title here, we're kind of looking at trends seen from per connection reports of what we're currently seeing for server support for post-quantum TLS. But to contextualize this a little bit, I've spoken in previous MAPRG sessions where we've been looking at a kind of a view from the client side on per connection basis of what we see for server protocol adoption. And this is actually related to some of the happy eyeballs things you saw earlier, where we see the relative V6 and V4 support on dual stack networks, how often we see TLS version support, like we tracked when we saw the rise of TLS 1.3, or how often HTTP2 is being used. And so what we're looking at here is less about the specific protocol details and more about what we see in the trends of how different server deployments are adopting new protocols. And as a hint, like the kind of the conclusion here is that we continue to see this divergence of populations that update to all the cool new fancy things and ones that don't. And we're getting this widening divide that we're seeing between different servers. So essentially, this is just like an updated look at those things that we've talked about before, but now looking at a new algorithm within TLS 1.3, which is supporting the key exchange X25519 MLChem 768 group. Essentially, that's when I refer to PQTLS, that's what I mean. So just to jump into the numbers, so this is looking at individual connections we see made in a browser context, seen from the client. So I'm separating out here the quick-based connections and the TCP-based connections. So in the TCP-based connections, which is you're going to assume is HTTP2 or HTTP1, the dominant TLS version we see overall is TLS 1.3 without PQTLS. That's 63%. We saw TLS 1.3 get adopted quite widely. There's still a straggler hold left of 17% on older TLS versions, TLS 1.2. But then there's already right now a 20% adoption we see there of PQTLS, which is only available within TLS 1.3. when we look over in the quick world, I'm not comparing the overall populations of quick and TCP, but we see that if you are doing quick and if you connect to quick and you kind of win that as the happy eyeballs race, you're 91% likely to have that connection be PQTLS right now. So this is showing a much higher adoption and upgrade rate of your TLS stack if you are using quick. It's not surprising, but it's a very strong correlation. So that's one of the things we wanted to share. When we look at the non-browser world, it's different. And I think this is interesting because I think oftentimes we see data specifically from the web browser case. But this is going to include things like mail clients or other random connections being made by different apps. We see a different landscape. We see more TLS 1.2 usage, a lot less PQTLS within TCP connections, and slightly less PQTLS adoption within Quick. So it means there's some more different bespoke Quick connections that haven't yet been turning on PQTLS, but it's still pretty good. It's still 80%. It's still a very high correlation here. Now let's look at V4 V6 because we love V4 V6 and happy eyeballs and stuff. Again, very strong correlation. So it's like this is just looking within Quick connections now. So if you were in that Quick population that you didn't do PQTLS, which you remember is just like 10%, you were also very likely to not support V6. You're 60% of the time doing IPv4 only, which is interesting. So it's like there is a population of people who did Quick, but they're not upgrading their TLS stacks and they're not doing V6. And then if you are in that 90% of you are doing PQTLS, you're also 90% likely within that to be supporting V6 and having V6 win the race. So we see this divergence again. TCP world, we essentially see the same metrics for TLS 1.2 and TLS 1.3 as far as dual stack support. That being like in the 30s, like 1/3 of connections. But then of the people who have been updating and update their TLS stack, they're 2/3 likely to use V6. So again, a strong correlation to if you update things, you update all the things. And if you don't update things, you don't update any of the things. That's kind of the lesson here. Just a quick look at perf. So PQTLS is adding data to the handshake. It means that the client handshake has 2 packets in the client initial instead of 1. So there's a higher likelihood that you're going to have some loss. It also potentially, because you were doing 2 key exchanges kind of in one, you have slightly more processing overhead. So it shouldn't be any faster, except it is faster in practice. But that's not because the algorithm's faster. That's because, again, we see this correlation. So if we're looking at the P90 connection setup time, the fastest case is the people who are using PQTLS because they're the ones who have also updated all of the things, and they probably have better deployments that are closer to the users on the edges. If we actually look then and we normalize the connection setup time by round trip time, then we do see that actually PQTLS connections are less efficient. So they are, compared to the round trip time, very slightly worse because they do have a slightly higher likelihood of having a packet loss and having to recover from that. But overall, the benefits we see from other aspects of your updating your protocols, you're making sure that things are optimized for the client latency, win overall. So that's what I wanted to share. Essentially, the conclusions are we see strong correlation between using Quick and doing things like PQTLS, which is updating your TLS stack. We see strong correlation between using V6 and updating your TLS stack. And the strongest correlation is between the group of people who do Quick and IPv6 who have updated all the things. And for performance, there is a performance impact on the efficiency, but it is much less impactful than other factors that we see servers doing to optimize client connections. And that's it.
All right, great. We've got 2 or 3 people in the queue. Let's take it to the end of the meeting.
Jeff Houston. Look, I'm kind of confused because you're reporting that even when the client hello becomes 2 packets, it's still of the same speed as non-post, normal cryptography and establishing the connection.
It's not more round trips. It's just more packets in the flight.
But you're suggesting that it's the same speed, right? That slide.
I am.
That
so
one.
if you look over here, if you normalize it for RTT, so it means that the people who were these same servers who updated, I think they did get slower at P90, but they were already so much faster that it didn't matter. That's what I'm saying.
The report from Facebook Engineering, because I looked it up because I was kind of
sure
that doesn't correlate with other things I've read about the burden on splitting that client hello into two, says there's an additional RTT delay because it waits for the three-way handshake to complete before sending the part 2 packet of the client hello. And I was just wondering,
okay,
why am I confused?
In practice, I don't believe you need to. I do not see it needing to wait ever.
Or your implementation does not.
Sure. That may be the case. I'm not sure about that data you're looking at. Of course, occasionally, if you do have loss, you may need to recover it. But essentially, what we're saying is that even if it makes, from a server perspective, you get slightly slower, that's not the overwhelming factor. There are other things you could do to improve.
I think that resolves my confusion, but who knows?
Yeah. Very good.
We have Marco. Marco's up next, and then we have the queue locked. If you're in the room, you're welcome to stay after and finish those questions, but we're going to be out of time after this.
Hey, Marco Munizaga. This was really cool. Thanks. Do you have a sense? Okay, so with this divide of early and late adopters, do you have a sense that this divide happens at every iteration of protocol updates, or is it like the early adopters always seem to keep up?
That's kind of like the overarching idea of this set of talks, and we're still seeing it, we're still learning because we've looked at what happened when TLS 1.3 comes out. And to me, it kind of looks like, yes, there are these ramps and there are early adopters, but it seems that there are stragglers who are left behind and they're not moving.
Yeah.
And I think we're just getting a widening gap where there's a ramp up, there's a ramp up, there's a ramp up. It's the same population, roughly, that is updating. And we're going to have 2 sets of internet protocol stacks we're going to end up with here.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, so that'll technically be the end, but Momoka, if you want to come up and Tommy's willing to hang.
Momoka, hi. So for the IPv4 versus IPv6 data, for the IPv4 data, can Safari differentiate between IPv4 only clients going to dual stack servers versus dual stack servers going to IPv4 only?
So I should have clarified this data when I was looking at V6 and V4 was only looking at clients with dual stack connectivity.
Oh, okay. Oh, great.
Just to only have a view of what the server supports.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Vaibhav?
Hi, Tommy. Thanks for for some of the plots for bringing this data. I'm not sure if pie charts and bar charts can show correlation. So I think you have to show correlation coefficients to show correlation between 2 entities or variables.
Sure.
Besides, I think there is a lot of variables that are hiding behind the scenes. So what is the population sample for Quick and for TCP?
Yep,
So this
I
would be useful
understand.
to know.
This is just what I'm able to share here. So.
Also with PQTLS, it could be that you're just simply hitting a CDN, and without PQTLS, you're not hitting a CDN. So there might be multiple other factors that are actually playing a role. You're also assuming that the network is identical between different samples. It could be that somebody who's using TLS 1.3 with PQTLS has higher access network bandwidth than others. And so many variables that come into play. I think it's not so easy to make such a conclusion.
Sure. And just one thing to clarify here, that essentially in all of these cases, the client is offering the same initial. The client is just saying, hey, I support TLS 1.3 and PQTLS, and this is just what the server responds with. So it's not going to vary per network in terms of what the client is offering. But you're absolutely right that there are absolutely all these different pieces of data that are hidden in the correlations. I'm not even trying to tease those apart. I just think it's an interesting thing to think about. And I'd love for other people to also try to help dig into how do we understand this divide in deployment trend. Allison.
Tommy, Allison Menken. This is very interesting and very broad. and this is probably a futile question, but do you have the ability to make an anonymized version of this data set to be made available? I probably not, but it would be so useful for people who are looking at studies of broad-based adoption of and performance of TLS.
I mean, I don't have the ability to grant that to you now. Like that would be lovely. But I think that is something that we've talked about before in MAPRG of like, how do we have broader contributions from people who have data sets? I'm happy to engage in that discussion. I'm not able to promise anything.
Yeah, understand. Okay. All right.
Maybe rather than
hopefully there's some
having
others. Thank you so much.
maybe how rather than having it open, people can maybe approach you, and then on a one-to-one basis, you can see if you can support research.
If there are things that we want to see in future MAPRG presentations, maybe that's a starting point. Thank you all.
So despite all the discussions, please update your stacks and bring more measurement data, and that's the real end. And thank you to Brian for taking notes. Thanks.
Enjoy the rest of the weekend. Hopefully see you in Shenzhen. So the thing that I want to ask you about is I talked to Ethan.